Let's get into the fun stuff. How do the board shapes actually affect the tricks that I'm doing? All of this is going to be based on generalizations, their trends, all of this is relative and none of it's set in stone. I just really think that this kind of board science is super cool and I love getting into deep talks about this. Like, this is super fun for me. In general, freestyle skateboards come in three broad shapes, which would be a single kick, an asymmetrical double kick, and a symmetrical double kick. A single kick has one upturned kick tail and a flat or almost flat nose. These are the classic shapes and are great for traditional freestyle tricks. An asymmetrical double kick has both an upturned kick tail and an upturned kick nose, but they have different lengths, angles, and shapes. These tend to be better for ollie tricks since you have an upturned nose to catch your tricks on. And then we have symmetrical double kicks, which typically have two upturned tails that are the same length, angle, and shape. And whether you like your double kicks to be symmetrical or asymmetrical is really all about preference and utility, how you want to use the board and your style. Freestyle boards tend to be quite a bit shorter than your average popsicle, which helps them spin faster and gives them more clearance for tricks like bebops or no-handed pogos. The wheelbases also tend to be much shorter. Wheelbase is the distance between the inside bolts of your two trucks, and while street skateboards average between 14 and 15 inches here, a lot of freestyle boards can start around 13.5 inches and go all the way down to 11 inches. This is similar to the overall length. The shorter wheelbases lets the board rotate faster and makes them very responsive, while a longer wheelbase rotates slower but tends to be a lot more stable. So when I'm out skating, the longer wheelbase on the Utah feels incredibly stable for rolling tricks. I have the most solid lands, but shove-its do whip around much faster on the shorter Bixby 7.4, making something like a stationary 360 shove-it much easier. Freestyle boards also tend to be quite small, ranging from 7.75 inches on the wider side to 7.3 on the smaller side, though there are bigger and smaller boards. But this small size helps them flip faster. I also found tricks like the Casper Disaster to be way easier on these thinner boards. And that's why it doesn't surprise me that Denim Hill is always crushing these on his 7.25 Pro model. If you love double finger flips and double or triple rail flips, or even freestyle kick flips, these thinner boards, these 7.3s and the 7.4s, in theory rotate a lot faster. And that's because there's a lot less to turn in the same amount of time. I can confirm that the smaller the board I am, the faster it rotates. So like when I was doing, I learned finger flips on a rather large board, and when I took them to this 7.4 for the first time, I was consistently rotating a finger flip and a quarter or a half with the same amount of strength that I used to finger flip just once with a much larger board. So these thinner boards definitely flip faster with the same strength. And so what you see here is just, in general, freestyle boards are smaller, they're shorter, they're thinner, they have smaller wheelbases, and typically even have, shorter kicks. And that's because we aren't jumping downstairs or launching off ramps, where the extra length and width could be a huge benefit in terms of stability. Freestyle boards often tend to have very mellow concave. Boards like the Bixby and Utah shape have some curvature, but something like the Huntington is really close to being flat. And I think that Tony Gale's Pro model is actually flat, if I remember that correctly. Basically, the flatter the board, the less there is to get in the way of your feet shuffling around. Your heels will never get caught on the edges, and you have this really nice, comfortable platform to stand and play on, since the edges are not curving up into the bottom of your feet, making flat concave perfect for footwork. But for the average enthusiast like me, extra concave will make varial tricks easier. While I've gotten them on an open source board and a Bixby 7.4, I have not been able to get them on the almost flat Huntington.
Real quick, this is what normally happens to me when I've tried this trick in the past on the Huntington deck. I have never flipped it before today. That was awesome. I just couldn't find the old footage and missing it, so I thought I'd just try a few today. Cannot believe I got it to flip. That was a first, so.
I actually find that a little bit of concave in the middle can help me for manipulating something like a shifty, and of course they're great if you want to do more varial flips and flicks off the sides of your boards. But even then, something super flat like the Huntington shape cannot stop talents like Ethan Young from doing really sick varial kickflips on it. The kick angle also tends to be very mellow on freestyle boards. Basically, the more mellow the kick angle, the less effort it takes to Casper, and typically the more comfortable it is for something like a no-handed pogo or truck stands in general. The spoon nose on the Huntington and the really mellow kicks on Utah shape are both really great for Caspers and pogos, but I can still do them on my steeper boards. It's just a slightly different nuance. Flat noses also have an advantage in finger flips. I was able to get double finger flips to rotate for the very first time on a single kick, which I could not do on any other board. But skaters like Danimal are still throwing out doubles on double kicks. Modern popsicle boards are quite well known for their steep tails and noses. A steep tail is great for ollie tricks. You have lots of space right here to pop your board down, and then you also have a nice steep nose to grab onto your front foot and then manipulate the board and finesse those tricks or flips. But once again, I would call these differences advantages. Talented and experienced skaters like Ike can pop massive tricks on low kicktails. Sean can catch killer heel flips off of these single kicks, and Utah can get really leveled out kick flips on these ridiculously mellow tails. As someone who likes flat ground skating and ollie tricks like myself, just having a decent mellow kick is enough. I can enjoy all of my popped tricks without any issues. And finally, we have kick shape. Rounder, smaller noses tend to roll and flip fast. It's a very smooth transition along the edge of the nose, making them feel very responsive. So I find it smoother to do something like a rail to rail on these, and a lot easier to underflip from tail since you're not scooping a big square kick, making this trick even easier off the nose of a single kick in my opinion. But to compare the two ends of an asymmetrical double kick, you can see here, even though I was not trying to do this, I tried to do these rail flips exactly the same way. You can see that the board naturally rolls a little bit higher off of the round nose as it turns. Which means a round nose like this might be great for getting into something like a butter flip to get that board really up and off the ground nicely. So I'm no rail expert by any means, but when I've talked to Mike in the past about this, Mike Osterman, he does say that he tends to see a kind of higher and more powerful rail flip off of a squarer tail, probably because you're like popping up off of that edge. And then he tends to see a faster but lower, maybe quicker, more responsive flip off of the nose, probably just because of how that shape rolls against the ground. Though single flat noses also tend to get really high poppy rail flips as well. But to continue, a bigger, squarer, fuller tail is great to catch something like an M80, where you might be more likely to miss or whiff on a smaller landing pad. Really, any trick you want to land into a manual, spacewalk, or pivot, that bigger, fuller shape is a great catching spot. And the blunter end is also very stable in Casper and truck stand since it rolls around less. I know that I loved doing these tricks on the Utah shape because of those big, full, stable kicks. My own preferences are a little unfortunate. As for the width, I love a 7.5. That's probably been my favorite width so far. I do prefer a double kick, but I like my kick angles to be a little bit on the steeper side. I also prefer a twin tail with a slightly fuller, squarer shape on both ends. And if you're looking at those numbers and thinking that that's kind of unfortunate, it's probably because you noticed there's not a freestyle board that I've found with those specs yet. which is why I'm always sacrificing something when I'm going out to skate. But that's actually okay. In fact, recently, I've been skating the spoon nose, which I liked when I first got it, but I wasn't quite in love with it because I prefer double kicks in general. But the more I've skated this month, the last couple sessions, the more I've just had tons of fun on this shape, and I'm really starting to understand the appeal of having a flat nose. I mean, I've definitely gotten a few tricks on here that I think are thanks to this flat nose, making it a lot easier. Stuff like the double rail flip. It's also made me realize just how much I love this size, the 7.5 width and the 13-inch wheelbase is really, I think, like my size sweet spot. I've even gotten double flips on this while standing on the ground, which I couldn't do at all with my larger board. I got some sick rail flips that I mentioned on it, and kick flips like the N80 and my first fakie kick flip. So sticking with this over the last month has been totally worth it. I've actually been having a great time and probably going to skate this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I'm pretty vocal about loving symmetrical shapes. I think it just really suits how I skate and how I want to skate. But as far as the Utah goes, the extra wide and long, big, stable, sturdy boat platform, along with the very mellow nose or very mellow tails, is kind of what I love about this board and what I don't love about this board. It's almost like the strengths are the weaknesses in a weird way, if that makes sense to you, because that's how I feel about it. I think I'm actually going to be setting up a Bixby 7.6 next for the slightly thinner platform, and then also the slightly steeper kicktail and nose. I think that's going to be my next go. Unfortunately, I do switch around between my boards pretty often, but I tend to go back to the same thing, which is around a 13-inch wheelbase and around a 7.6 width. I do have the little board. I have the 7.4 in the Bixby shape, which is fun. It's fun to experiment with and play on. I've actually gotten some really fun tricks on this as well. And although the difference between the two shapes don't seem that big on paper, I really struggled to get used to these smaller sizes. So even though I pulled them out to experiment and have a few sessions on, it's just hard for me to commit to this size. I don't know why. I just struggle with it, unfortunately. I just like my larger freestyle boards. They don't flip as fast or give as much clearance for some tricks, but I'll probably be sticking with the larger freestyle boards for the most part. And I think that's especially true because I do like to dabble in a little bit of street and park skating, so having a more in-between size definitely makes the transition easier from big street deck to small freestyle board. But those are just my preferences and my observations and what I've heard from other skaters. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got something out of it, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Happy weekend.